Welcome to the Salty DM. This is not preparation, it's damage limitation. Short comedy reflections about roleplay, DM life, table chaos, and why we still show up. Written by Neil Meyer, creator of the Cal Harborn RPG books. Right, let's roll. So, have you ever run a session 0? Because if you haven't, let me explain what it's meant to be. Session 0 is the bit before the adventure starts, where everyone sits down like adults and agrees what sort of game they're going to play. Tone, boundaries, expectations, house rules. The sort of calm, sensible conversation you imagine grown people are capable of. Which is adorable. Session 0 is not preparation. Session 0 is damage limitation. It's me, a middle-aged man with a stable job and a mortgage, trying to stop 5 other adults, and I use that word loosely, from turning a heroic fantasy campaign into a live-action group chat with emotional knives, and occasionally actual knives, depending on how deep into the snacks we are. And I love it. I genuinely do. I'm deeply committed. I'm all in. The sort of committed where you think, this man should have taken up cycling instead. But cycling doesn't come with a sentient gelatinous cube you can bribe with jam sandwiches, does it? No, cycling requires Lycra and just ruins your knees. This ruins your soul. The silly dressing up is apparently still optional. I run 2 tables a week. Thursdays is my regular group, same people, a little over 4 years now, same rhythms, same emotional scars. And then on Sundays, I run one-shots at a gaming cafe, the Offline Troll, which is basically speed dating except the date is a goblin and everyone arrives carrying their own trauma and a brand new set of dice. But Thursdays is home, my long-term relationship with chaos. So a few months ago, I say, right, new arc, we're doing a session 0. And everyone turns up like it's a normal session, which is the first warning sign. Because session 0 is meant to be tea and biscuits and a chat. They turned up with vendettas, opinions, and at least one person who had already written a 3-page backstory and was angry I hadn't read it yet. First, there's Diane. Diane is my wife. Yes, I know, conflict of interest. It is a conflict of interest. It is also a tactical error. We met at a board gaming convention, a story you tell people so they stop asking how you met online. We've shared dice ever since, which in this hobby is basically marriage vows, in sickness and in health, in critical failures and successes. Diane has one consistent character concept across every system, every setting, every tone. She needs a dog. Not a spiritual companion, not I have the soul of a wolf. An actual dog. Specifically, a basset hound. It does not matter if we're in epic high fantasy. It does not matter if we're doing grim gothic horror. It does not matter if we're in a survival campaign where food is scarce and hope is a rumor. There will be a basset hound, sometimes magical, sometimes ghostly, sometimes polymorphed. Always a basset hound. I used to think, that's fun! Now I think, this is a logistical nightmare with floppy ears. Because basset hounds have a very particular energy. They're noble. They're stubborn. They look like they were designed by a committee that couldn't agree on the legs. Yes, we have 3 in real life, which means my home life already includes low-level random encounters, mostly at 3 a.m., mostly involving a suspicious noise and the immediate assumption that it's my problem. And Diane plays them endearing, frustrating, and faintly catastrophic in equal measure. Also, Diane mostly stays in character until she slips into wife mode. Wife mode is where she stops being Sister Elowyn of the Dawnfather and becomes my actual spouse in front of the table. I'll be like, the lich raises a skeletal hand. The air turns cold. You feel dread. And Diane, still doing the voice, will say, lovely. After this, can you take the bins out? They're starting to smell. So now I'm trying to maintain dread while thinking, yes, dear, I will do the bins after I finish killing Barry's barbarian. Which brings us neatly to Barry. Barry is my mate from an old IT job, 15 years ago, back when our biggest enemy was wrestling a risk register and optimism still existed. Barry comes to D&D to switch his brain off. That's the agreement, and I respect that. But Barry takes switch my brain off so seriously that I'm convinced he leaves it in his car. He plays barbarians, fighters, druids, anything where the decision tree is basically hit it, hug it, or turn into a bear and hit it. He wants to feel heroic without having to consult a racy chart. So during session 0, I'm explaining tone. I'm talking about mystery, intrigue, consequences. Barry nods politely and says, cool, I can still hit stuff though, yeah? Yes, Barry, there will be hitting. I am not taking away your one joy. Next is Alison. Alison is a technical architect by day and a rules lawyer in recovery by night, which I genuinely appreciate. Self-awareness is important. It's like a vampire on a diet. You still lock the windows, but you admire the effort. Diane invited Alison years ago with the classic trap line, come along, give it a try. And Alison loved it. She owns every book, every supplement. If the publisher released a leaflet called Optional Rules for Sitting Down, Alison would own 2 copies, printed and digital. She's also on every forum, every subreddit, every podcast where people argue about whether a spell can technically target a shadow. In session 0, I say, this campaign will be more character-driven. Alison says, just to clarify, when you say character-driven, are you referring to the optional variant in the Dungeon Master's Guide on page? I don't know, Alison. I'm referring to the variant where I'd like you to care about an NPC for more than 10 minutes without asking their armor class. She plays clerics, paladins, wizards, honor, duty, faith, a moral compass. Which is funny because she brings that same moral compass to rules interpretation. If a rule bends, it's not cheating, it's an ethical dilemma. Then there's Charles. Charles is the oldest and the oddest member of the group, which is impressive because I am also there, and I own 300 board games and dice that look like haunted suites. Charles joined via a Facebook post. He arrived with the quiet intensity of a man who has read too much history and refuses to be impressed by your goblins. He's a retired political researcher, very aware of current events, and he brings that awareness to the table with anecdotes and wisdom. He's a staunch socialist, which means every fantasy setting I create instantly becomes a case study. I'll say, the Baron controls the mines. Charles will say, so the means of production have been seized by a hereditary elite. Yes, Charles, that's a Baron. That's what they do. He plays bards and clerics. He overplays them, lovingly. Monologues, poetry, emotional weather. Sometimes it's brilliant. Sometimes we all sit there thinking, this is theater. Other times I'm thinking, Charles, it's a goblin. It has 2 hit points. It does not need a redemption arc. And finally, Jeanine. Jeanine is Alison's daughter and the youngest at the table. Early 20s, least committed participant, which is fair because she has a life. Her signature phrase is, oh my God, you don't get it, which is surprisingly versatile in how it can be used. She always plays the same character. She will tell you it's different, new hair, new accent, new tragic detail, but it is always a tragically misunderstood figure fighting for a lost love. Every setting, desert, sea, Feywild. The lost love was taken by sand pirates, the tide, or a metaphor, and she will look you dead in the eye and say, this is a totally different character. Of course it is. Like when I renew LinkedIn Premium and decide I'm going to change my life. So, that's the cast. Session 0 begins. I explain what Session 0 is. It's where we agree on tone, I say. Expectations, boundaries. Everyone nods. This arc is grounded, I say. Grittier. Choices matter. Barry says, cool. Alison says, define gritty. Charles says, who owns the land? Jeanine says, is there romance? Diane says, my basset hound is called Pickles. Of course it is. I ask how the party knows each other. We fought together in a war, says Barry. We were in love and he vanished, says Jeanine. I'm restoring a sacred order, says Alison. I'm a revolutionary poet, says Charles. Pickles is my emotional support basset hound and the rightful heir to a cursed duchy, says Diane. Right. Yes. Grounded. Then boundaries. I say, any lines? Any veils? I don't want admin, says Barry. I don't want violence without consequence, says Charles. I don't want people mocking my character's feelings, says Jeanine. No harm to basset hounds, says Diane. Not animals, specifically basset hounds. Then house rules. Phones at the table. We're adults, Diane says kindly, which is true. Adults who will absolutely watch a raccoon eating grapes mid-combat if given permission. And I finish by saying, look, I'm not your enemy. I'm not trying to kill you. I'm trying to challenge you. They smile. And I know. I know that in 3 sessions, Barry will attempt diplomacy via headbutt. Alison will quote a rule like she's cross-examining a witness. Charles will try to unionize the goblins. Jeanine will fall in love with the first brooding NPC and accuse me of emotional manipulation when he betrays her. And Diane will ask if Pickles can roll for insight. Not her character, Pickles. And I will allow it. Because that's what Session 0 really is. It's not rules. It's not tone. It's not boundaries. It's the moment you look at your table, think, these people are ridiculous, and then quietly decide you're going to build a world for them anyway. Even if one of them is a basset hound with a cursed duchy and better character development than half your NPCs. Thanks for listening to The Salty DM. New episodes are on the way. You'll find listings to more of my RPG work in my profile. If you'd like to support the show, the Patreon link is in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this, please leave a rating. If you didn't, perhaps don't. See you soon.